this hour on I24 News.
The result of the ballot held this evening is that the parliamentary party does have confidence.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has survived a no-confidence vote and will keep her job, but the future of her plan for the UK's divorce from the European Union is in deep trouble.
Police in France are still on the hunt for the suspect who opened fire at a Christmas market in Strasbourg. Officials say they know the person and believe he has been radicalized.
And the longtime personal attorney for President Trump has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. Michael Cohen admitted to lying to Congress, tax evasion, and campaign finance violations. He said he had felt it was his duty to cover up the president's dirty deeds. The president ignored reporter questions at the White House.
What dirty deeds is he talking about, Mr. President?
From the I24 News studios in Times Square in New York, this is Crossroads with David Shuster and Tal Heinrich.
In France, a massive manhunt is underway at this hour for the suspect in Tuesday's deadly shooting attack on a Christmas market in Strasbourg.
2 people were killed and more than a dozen were injured. Authorities say they know who the suspect is and believe he may be trying to leave the country. Molly Hunter has the latest.
The attacker got away. 29-year-old Sharif Shakat entered the Strasbourg Christmas market area around 8 p.m. Tuesday night. Crowded with families and tourists, he opened fire at 3 different locations, killing at least 2 people, injuring 14, including a police officer.
People actually started yelling, and I could hear crowds running away.
People sheltered wherever they could, behind walls, inside restaurants, the European Parliament trapped inside. The wounded on the ground, other pedestrians helping out. There were 2 shootouts with police, and Shakat is believed to be injured, but today he's still on the run. Authorities say Shakat has spent time in prison. During one stint, they believe he was radicalized, and he's on the French terror list. Tuesday morning, police raided his apartment in connection with a robbery, finding knives and grenades, but he wasn't there. Hours later, the attack. French President Emmanuel Macron has raised the threat level to emergency attack, and all of this familiar to Europeans. 2 years ago, a deadly terrorist attack on a Christmas market in Berlin.
And that was Molly Hunter reporting. And Tal, at the moment, it's not clear if this was just him acting alone or whether he was part of some sort of organized conspiracy to carry this off.
Right. He was in a watch list of people who represent potential threat to national security in France. Reportedly, he also shouted in Arabic, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest, when he opened fire. And this comes at a very troubling time for French President Emmanuel Macron as he also tries to battle these yellow vest protests.
Yeah, I mean, really difficult, challenging time for him. And, of course, it would all be helped, of course, if they can catch this guy who allegedly did it, because this is a big test right now for French security forces.
Yeah, and a recurring one.
Yeah. Let's now move to Great Britain, where British Prime Minister Theresa May has survived a confidence vote from Conservative lawmakers in her own party who oppose her Brexit plan.
May says now that the vote is behind her, the country must face the important matter at hand.
Following this ballot, we now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country. A Brexit that delivers on the vote that people gave, that brings back control of our money, our borders and our laws, that protects jobs, security and the union, that brings the country back together rather than entrenching division. That must start here in Westminster, with politicians on all sides coming together and acting in the national interest.
To discuss, let's bring in UK correspondent Jonathan Setradoti in London live for us. Jonathan, if you can explain the results from the Tories' perspective. These are the Conservatives in the House of Commons in the British Parliament. What are they saying to Prime Minister Theresa May by the way they voted today?
So 48 members of the Parliamentary Conservative Party submitted letters to a backbench committee, which then triggered off a vote of no confidence in her. That means to say that the Conservative Party was voting on whether or not they had confidence in her as their leader. But of course, if she was toppled from that position, she would also be toppled eventually from the position of Prime Minister. Now, that vote was triggered today. It happened extremely quickly. Some thought it might happen next week, but instead they moved to make it happen very fast. And she won with 200 votes in her favour, but 117 against her. And some are saying that that means that a third of her MPs voted against her, and that in fact, if you discount the fact that the so-called payroll members of parliament, those in the cabinet or with other roles which put them effectively on the government payroll, then the majority of backbench MPs voted against her. So she did win, she stays in place, but she's perhaps weakened by this result.
And Jonathan, what does it do to her efforts in terms of trying to successfully navigate the Brexit through both the British Houses of Parliament and also, of course, without much of a change from European capitals?
Well, so much has happened in recent days in British politics, and yet, in that respect, nothing has changed. Theresa May postponed that vote that was meant to take place this week in the House of Commons because she knew that she couldn't win it. She knew that the numbers were absolutely stacked against her, with those even in her own party, many of those voting against it or saying they were going to. So now she has exactly the same problem. She went off to Europe on a whistle-stop tour, meeting different European leaders in order to try to get some concessions so that she could bring back effectively the same deal but slightly altered and get people to vote with her. Now, that's not really seemed to happen. She hasn't presented any changes that have satisfied many people. She's still got perhaps some work to do in that respect, and she might be hoping that tonight's vote will also bolster support, as well as perhaps the fact that time is running out. Perhaps she thinks members of parliament will feel that the closer they get to the deadline, the harder it would be for her to be challenged on this.
Jonathan, at this point, is the UK starting to prepare for a no-deal Brexit, or is it too early for that?
Well, if Mrs May is to be believed, the UK has been preparing for a no-deal Brexit all along, and she said that those preparations were stepped up. The EU says the same. As the deadlines come close, both sides say they're preparing for a no-deal Brexit. But Mrs May doesn't sound very convincing when she has said in the past that no deal would be better than a bad deal, because many say that what she's offering them now is exactly that bad deal. And yet she seems scared of a no-deal Brexit, as do most members of parliament. So whether or not that's a real or tangible threat or just rhetoric, well, that remains to be seen.
And Jonathan, how is all of this playing with the public in the United Kingdom?
Most people in the United Kingdom are a mixture of fed up of hearing about Brexit and also extremely worried about the uncertainty that they're seeing being carried out by the government and by the EU. People don't seem to know exactly what's going to happen. Many who say they voted for Brexit are very afraid of what's going on. Some say there should be a second referendum so that the people could have their say again. Now they know what the deal is. Others, of course, saying that the Leave side won and that needs to be carried out, that it's the government's job to find a way of doing that effectively. But most people seem to think that Mrs May isn't necessarily doing a great job of that. People do, however, in polls, seem to want her to stay on and fight through this. And perhaps people's opinions are moving in her favour. Perhaps people will support her carrying out this Brexit according to the negotiated deal that she's come up with. It all remains to be seen over the next days, weeks and months, but that deadline is fast approaching.
UK correspondent Jonathan Sarchidoti reporting for us from London. Jonathan, thank you. Tal, what a mess.
What a mess. We think that we have action here in politics with Michael Cohen, but in the British Parliament, you know, things are, well, very, very exciting, I would say. You know, British Prime Minister Theresa May, she just secured her position for the next 12 months. She couldn't be ousted, but she's already saying that she wouldn't run in the next elections. Are you surprised?
You know what? It's throwing a bone to the people who don't want her, don't have confidence in her, because now they can see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. She will be something of a lame duck as a result. But in the meantime, I mean, for the next 12 months, I mean, she is it. And they have to figure out now, the decision is, okay, do we do the sort of Brexit plan that she has negotiated, or do we go through with a very hard Brexit? And the arguments are very complex on both sides, but it doesn't seem like like anything's happening in terms of getting close to a deal.
Right, and the question is also tomorrow when she wakes up and goes to the EU again to renegotiate and try to get some concessions, how will she be viewed following this vote back at home?
Absolutely. Still ahead. In Israel, doctors were unable to save the unborn baby of a woman who was critically injured in a drive-by shooting. Police say they have arrested at least one Palestinian connected to the attack.
In New York, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just called for the United Nations to stop Iran over ballistic missile testing. Pompeo says the Iranian effort is out of control. Welcome back. In New York, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just urged the United Nations to stop Iran from conducting ballistic missiles tests. He told the Security Council today Iran's ballistic missile activity had increased since the nuclear deal took effect in 2016.
This past spring, the United States withdrew from that agreement and reimposed sanctions on Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been monitoring Iran and says that they are in compliance, but Pompeo accuses Iran of engaging in a testing and proliferation spree.
Now it's time for this Security Council to get serious about this real risk from proliferation from the Iranian regime. And it is our determination to do everything we can, everything within, as the President says, everything we can to make sure that we do the right thing. We're going to exert American leadership to build a coalition. And you heard today, you heard 11 members of the Security Council join the United States in expressing their concerns about the Iranian missile proliferation.
For more, let's bring in senior diplomatic correspondent Nina Larson in Washington. Nina, Mike Pompeo, he talked today at the United Nations about building a coalition against Iran. What does he mean by that? Is it a military coalition?
Well, certainly at this stage, it's a bit unclear, Tal. It seems that at least here today, he was talking about some kind of diplomatic coalition of, and I'm quoting here, responsible nations. And he did enjoy some support from the Security Council, permanent members and rotating members today, including some support from the Europeans, actually, who have been very resistant to tampering with that original deal, as everybody knows by now. It seems there seems some wiggle room now on perhaps including some aspects of Iran's ballistic missile program, which is disturbing everybody.
And, Nina, there was no sign of Nikki Haley at the Security Council, but instead the outgoing U.S. ambassador to the UN gave an exit interview on the Today Show, and it seemed like she broke with President Trump on Saudi Arabia.
Yes, it seemed that Secretary of State Pompeo was absolutely blindsided by this interview. Someone raised it today in a Q&A after his Security Council appearance, and he didn't seem to have watched the interview himself when he was in New York. But let's take a listen to what Haley had to say about the Saudis.
I think we need to have a serious, hard talk with the Saudis to let them know we won't condone this, we won't give you a pass, and don't do this again. And then I think that the administrations have to talk about where we go from here. What I can tell you that's so important is that the Saudis have been our partner in defeating and dealing with Iran, and that has been hugely important.
Well, and Haley wasn't the only high-profile figure taking to the stage today to talk about the Saudis. We also heard from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
What happened in Istanbul is horrific. Nothing short of that. It's horrific. And I think that'll be dealt with in its own way. It's balanced by the importance of Saudi Arabia and the role it plays in the Middle East, because if Saudi Arabia were to be destabilized, the world would be destabilized. Not the Middle East, the world would be destabilized.
Well, one thing that Pompeo, Haley and Netanyahu all agree on there, of course, is that Saudi Arabia is a very important strategic ally in the region. But, David, this was an extraordinary appearance by Pompeo earlier today at the Security Council. He really was very tough on Iran, no surprise there. But he was also saying that an arms embargo that was due to be lifted in 2020 should remain in place because Iran is proliferating all over the region. He gave very specific examples, and also the threat perhaps also to Europe at this point.
Nina Larson, senior diplomatic correspondent reporting from Washington. Nina, thank you.
In Syria, one person was killed and nearly 24 more were injured in a car bomb explosion in the northwest province of Aleppo. The blast struck near a medical center. There are fears the death toll may rise as some of the injured are in critical condition. So far, no group has claimed responsibility.
This bombing came hours after Turkey's president announced a new military operation in northern Syria. Turkey is targeting the Syrian Kurdish militia, the YPG. That group is a key U.S. ally in the war against Islamic State. So the Turkish operation is complicating the U.S. relationship with Turkey's President Erdogan, who is standing firm.
We have said, and we are saying again, that we will start the operation to clear the east of the Euphrates from separatist terrorists in a couple of days. Our target is never U.S. soldiers. Our target is separatist terrorists who are active in the region.
To discuss, let's bring in Eric Mandel, director of the Middle East Political Information Network, a private Middle East research team. Eric, Kurdish fighters are the real reason why Turkey is so involved in the war in Syria. And President Erdogan, he says that basically the United States is violating an agreement over this area in which they are, the Manbij area. He said the United States promised Turkey that the Kurdish fighters will be removed. The U.S. didn't deliver, so we will take care of it ourselves. Can you explain how complicated the situation is for the United States to be caught in between two allies in Syria?
So we're dealing with Turkey, which is a frenemy. We have good and bad, and they are obviously the eastern flank of NATO, but they are aligned with Iran, they're aligned with Russia, and Erdogan has an anti-Western agenda. The Kurds have been our allies, and not all Kurds are the same. The Kurds in Syria have been a part. We asked them to start something called the Syrian Democratic Forces about 3-4 years ago to bring in other minorities like Arabs. They were the ones who really did the hard work in getting rid of ISIS. Erdogan said today that Daesh, ISIS, is now gone. The primary target are the Kurds, who are the terrorists, who are affiliated with this alphabet soup of names with the PKK, who we also consider terrorists, and that any Kurd from the Turkish point of view in Syria seems to be considered a terrorist. But America's interest, America's goal, is stabilizing eastern Syria, the eastern side of the Euphrates, and this will give America what its primary goal is, some leverage to decrease the expansionism of Iran. So this becomes the geopolitical issue here is Turkey, Russia, the Kurds, America, and different layers. And one day your friend is your friend, one day your friend is not your friend. So the complexity here is really strong. America's put up observation posts in Manbij in order to protect the Kurds. The Turks see it that way.
But what happens if then the Turks, even if they're spotted by these observation posts, start to attack the Kurds? Does the United States have an obligation, a moral obligation, to help the Kurds and fight off the Turks?
So the State Department and Defense Department have said these are clearly marked. If anybody attacks them, they know they're attacking American soldiers. We have 2,000 American soldiers, if you will, in harm's way. It was supposed to be, as you said in the beginning of the report, that the Kurds were supposed to leave Manbij, but they have not left. And you have to realize that before this, the Turks had done ethnic cleansing in different operations in the Euphrates Shield and Olive Branch, where they ethnically cleansed the Turks. So here is a huge pivotal time. Will the Turks do what they did in Cyprus 40 years ago? Take over northern Syria, they took over northern Cyprus. And would they have legitimate concerns about Kurdish resistance, Kurdish terrorists? But the Kurds have been our allies, and the world watches, our friends watch. Are we going to abandon our allies, the Kurds?
Eric Mandel, director of the Middle East Political Information Network, which is a private Middle East research firm. Eric, thank you. Appreciate it.
And we're staying in this area of the world, this region, the Middle East and Israel. Security forces have made an arrest in the shooting attack near the West Bank settlement of Afra. A pregnant woman was seriously injured in the attack, and now officials say that they have been unable to save her unborn baby. I24NEWS correspondent Lee Hannon is in the West Bank with the latest. And Lee, first of all, are authorities saying that this person, this Palestinian they've arrested, is the only one that they think was connected to this drive-by shooting?
Not at all, no. In fact, they have now confirmed, both sides have confirmed that Salah al-Barghouti was killed tonight in a raid by Israeli special forces, and one other person was arrested. As I speak to you, widespread clashes are taking place across this city. There's a lot of violence and outrage over what some people are calling an assassination by Israeli forces. Also, as I speak, the key focal point is the village of Khobar, where the Barghouti family are well known to the security services. Now Barghouti is a Hamas commander in the West Bank here, and his father, Salah's father, Omar, is currently holed up in a house with 100 people surrounded by Israeli forces. He's refusing to leave, barricaded himself in, and is surrounded by Israeli forces who sometime in the next minutes or hours are gonna raid this house.
I24 News correspondent Lee Hannon reporting from the West Bank. Lee, thank you.
Now to the third part of our in-depth look at Israel and the Gulf. Security and politics may play a major role in the warming tides, but there's more to it than just that.
That's right. Money, and more specifically economics, those are also playing key roles, and it could also one day link Israel to Saudi Arabia. Senior Middle East correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim has the story.
As Iran's influence continues to expand in the Middle East, two of America's closest allies find themselves cozying up. With the help of U.S. President Donald Trump, Israeli and Saudi officials began realizing the potential for doing business with each other. It's a two-way street. Both have something to give the other. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to transform his kingdom economically. MBS, as he's known in the West, has a 2030 vision, an economic revolution that will break the kingdom free from oil dependency and diversify its financial resources.
This project is not a place for any conventional investor. This is a place for dreamers who want to do something in the world.
And here, Israeli knowledge and technology becomes more and more attractive.
Because right now, as we speak, there are quite a few of the neighboring countries that are reaching out to Israel and normalizing relations with Israel, which is a step towards peace because of innovation.
For Israel, economic ties would have a huge contribution to its economy, especially if other Arab countries open up their gates as well.
Huge amounts of money that Israelis can earn from business with those countries. You know, we're talking about huge deals in technology, in medicine, in agriculture, in high-tech, in gas, energy.
MBS wants to transform Saudi Arabia with his 2030 vision, but that change needs know-how, and Israel believes it could offer that.
With the assets that we can sell and provide in a win-win situation where both sides can hugely benefit from it, it's a missed opportunity not to explore this path of progress and warming the relations.
Israel could supply Saudi Arabia with advanced technology on renewable energy, water treatment, and agriculture, worth billions of dollars. Its reputation as a cybersecurity powerhouse is something else Gulf states are attracted to. At the Israeli front, Minister of Transportation Israel Katz visited the Gulf country of Oman to promote an ambitious project aiming to connect Israel and Gulf states through railway. However, for Saudi-Israeli ties of any kind to become a reality, there needs to be a positive movement on the Israeli-Palestinian peace track. Without meaningful results, Saudi-Israeli ties will remain doubtful. Hamad Al-Qasim, I24 News.
All right, we're taking a short break. When we come back, the man known as the president's fixer, Michael Cohen, sentenced to 3 years in prison for federal charges, including lying to Congress and tax evasion.
And along the Korean Peninsula, soldiers from the north and the south removed frontline guard posts between their countries. They exchanged handshakes and also cigarettes. Reconciliation ahead.
Michael Cohen, the former longtime personal attorney for Donald Trump, was sentenced to 3 years in prison in federal court today.
That's right. Earlier, he pleaded guilty to a laundry list of charges stemming from both federal prosecutors in New York and special counsel Robert Mueller's office in Washington. Cohen is required to report to prison on March the 6th of next year. Correspondent Linda Lopez has the story.
Michael Cohen departed federal court in Manhattan Wednesday without addressing the crush of reporters and cameras. Just minutes before, an emotional Cohen had apologized at his sentencing hearing, pleading for leniency. Cohen saying that President Trump, his former boss of more than 10 years, caused him to, quote, follow a path of darkness rather than light, and, quote, cover up his dirty deeds. Cohen had pleaded guilty to 8 felony charges brought by the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, including campaign finance violations related to hush money payments Cohen allegedly arranged to 2 women during the 2016 presidential campaign. Cohen told prosecutors he arranged the payments at the direction of then-candidate Trump. Cohen also pleaded guilty to a charge brought by special counsel Robert Mueller, whose office praised Cohen's cooperation. The judge sentencing him to 36 months.
The fact that he's now getting 36 months, I think, is a win. Keep in mind, in the federal system, that means that he would have to serve at least 85% of that time, even with good behavior.
Judge William Pauley saying Cohen had, quote, lost his moral compass, and that, as a lawyer, Mr. Cohen should have known better. Despite President Trump insisting he is in no legal jeopardy, Lanny Davis, Cohen's advisor, suggests that Cohen has more information to tell prosecutors about President Trump.
Michael Cohen is now released to tell the full truth.
Linda Lopez reporting there. Let's bring in senior Washington correspondent Dan Raviv. Dan, what's the White House saying about the prison sentence for Michael Cohen?
On this day, nothing fresh and new, but early last week, President Trump made his opinion clear. He wrote that Michael Cohen should serve a full and complete prison sentence, and that Cohen is wrong if he thinks he can get leniency, considering that he committed crimes that have nothing to do with Trump, tax evasion and bank fraud. The president also has said that people who flip, that is, cooperate with prosecutors, often they're making up stories. They're lying to get a lenient sentence. As a matter of fact, the president has said that flipping should be banned. Tal and David?
Dan, there was a hint from Cohen on this day that he wants to testify, maybe publicly, against the president.
Well, first I'm thinking about what Michael Cohen said to the judge in court before the sentence of 3 years was announced. And Cohen said that he has brought shame to his family. He apologized to the people of the United States, and he said from now on he intends to be honorable. And then his lawyer, Lanny Davis, issued that statement we just heard about from Linda, which indicates that there is more to tell. And specifically, even though Cohen might be in federal prison, he's willing to be called by congressional committees and tell the full truth about his old friend, Donald Trump. Tal and David?
Dan Raviv, our senior Washington correspondent. Dan, thank you. To discuss all of this, let's bring in Randy Zellin, a former federal prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. And Randy, so there was also an element of this from the Southern District of New York involving the National Enquirer and an agreement with Donald Trump to try to keep certain things essentially buried. What's the illegality for the National Enquirer, possibly Donald Trump, in this?
Well, certainly this is the story that has not been told yet because it just happened and it's kind of been tucked away and buried in everything that is Michael Cohen. But as I understand it, the Department of Justice reached an agreement with the National Enquirer, or the National Enquirer's parent company, that the National Enquirer will not be prosecuted, and I would guess, nor any of its principals will be prosecuted, whether you want to call it being part of a conspiracy to engage in campaign finance fraud violations. Whatever the case may be, that is startling, because the fact that they're being offered a non-prosecution agreement means, A, the Department of Justice felt that there was wrongdoing related to what we call this catch and release, which is pay money to buy a story and then kill the story. We know what that story was. So that's startling. What's even more startling is that typically with a non-prosecution agreement, you got to give something to get something. So I can assure you there is a cooperation component that is part of this deal. So everyone goes to sleep tonight thinking about, was Michael Cohen treated fairly? Is 3 years too much? Is it not enough? What does it mean for the president? But stay tuned. The National Enquirer agreement may be more in terms of revealing.
How's the president going to sleep tonight? It was a bad day for Michael Cohen. Was it a bad day for the president as well? Because yesterday he told Reuters in an interview, it's hard to impeach somebody who hasn't done anything wrong. Are these felonies impeachable ones?
Well, certainly high crimes and misdemeanors, you're there. I mean, you're right in the crosshairs. Then you get into the debate as to whether or not a sitting president can be indicted. But put all of that to the side. The president... The last that the president spoke, and I think the reason why the president is not speaking today, because the president said himself a few startling things over the past couple of days. I didn't do anything, but if I did do something, it's not a crime, it's civil. And if we did do something and it's not a crime and it's just civil, it's okay because it's nothing and blame it on my lawyer. When you blame it on your lawyer, that is advice of counsel defense. When you raise an advice of counsel defense, say bye-bye to the attorney-client privilege.
But I think what the president was getting at is that when there is a campaign finance violation, it usually is settled in a civil manner through a fine. And we saw in the John Edwards case, where there was a campaign finance violation, that the Justice Department couldn't make those charges stick. So whether it's Michael Cohen saying, yes, we broke campaign finance laws, or the National Enquirer saying, we broke campaign finance laws because we didn't declare something of value that we were giving Donald Trump, it's still a difficult prosecution, isn't it?
Well, remember, once upon a time, the president standing in Air Force One, and I remember it distinctly, said, I don't know what you're talking about. Go ask my lawyer, Michael Cohen. Well, the Department of Justice has asked his lawyer, Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen has spoken. So has the National Enquirer. So are we all crazy? Or maybe the emperor needs to look into the mirror and see exactly what the emperor is wearing or maybe not wearing.
But Randy, you know, people are probably watching all of these developments, saying at home, so the president wanted to hide something from Melania. He paid these women. This is not something illegal. It's something that people do. And where's Russia in all of this? You know, we came here for Russia.
Well, here's the thing. We're still there for Russia, but what people lose sight of, like it or not, put politics aside, the special prosecutor's mandate isn't necessarily limited to what you initially start your investigation. It's not like if I see something, oh, no, that's not part of my mandate. I can't go there. No, that's not how it works. And the president's problem is, if the defense is, I wanted to keep it away from my wife and my family, the timing. And that's what gets us all jammed up when it comes to these criminal cases. It's the links and it's the timing. And here, the timing stinks. On the eve, all of a sudden, these payments are made.
Well, and look, even if, you know, as we can see, Robert Mueller farmed this out to the Southern District of New York to deal with these matters that aren't related to Russia, but we do know that Michael Cohen is cooperating with the special counsel on Russian business dealings the Trump organization was pursuing well into 2016. What is your read on how much Cohen is helping the special counsel based on the sentence and what was presented to the judge?
It's very interesting. We can't really tell because you saw, again, another, I hate to use the word startling, but everything is startling, a startling dynamic. The same Department of Justice, one assistant United States attorney saying, the guy's great.
In the special counsel's office.
Another assistant United States attorney saying, hey, you know what? He really wasn't so good. It's over.
In the Southern District of New York.
Exactly. That's crazy. But be that as it may, typically, a cooperator does not get sentenced until the cooperator's cooperation is over. Michael Cohen insisted that he wanted to be sentenced, and he probably knew as a result of that he would not get as much credit from the Southern District. They never said he lied. They just simply said he didn't do enough. Well, he didn't do enough. I want to be sentenced. I'm not going to finish it up. But he still can. He can come back and be resentenced. So don't be surprised if Michael Cohen does not surrender on March 6th. His cooperation continues. He knows he's capped at 3 years, so he's done there. He continues to cooperate. The government can make a subsequent motion saying, Judge, he's continued to help us. Let's get him resentenced. And he knows he's already got a ceiling at 3 years.
And we still have cooperation that he's giving to Robert Mueller, the special counsel. Randy Zellin, former federal prosecutor, criminal defense attorney. Randy, thank you. We appreciate it. Just ahead, Nuns with a bad habit. Police say 2 women in California stole $500,000 to splurge on gambling.
Welcome back. It's been 20 days since a Colorado woman disappeared on Thanksgiving Day. Her fiancé is out today with a statement responding to speculation surrounding him. And police are releasing surveillance video of the 29-year-old single mother, hoping that the video will prompt some new leads in the case. Correspondent Natalie Burnell has the latest.
This is the last confirmed sighting of Kelsey Barrett, shopping with her 1-year-old baby daughter at a Colorado Safeway market on Thanksgiving. Her fiancé, Patrick Frazee, telling police he hasn't seen the 29-year-old flight instructor since that afternoon when he picked up their daughter. When ABC's Clayton Sandell caught up with him, he refused to answer questions outside his home.
This is private property. This is a private road.
And again outside an attorney's office with the baby in his arms.
Patrick, why don't you talk to us?
Frazee told police he received a text message from Barrett on the 25th. The couple lived apart, and he didn't report her missing. Her mom did on December 2nd.
She's not the kind that runs off. This is completely out of character.
At this press conference Monday, Frazee a no-show. The police chief was asked why he wasn't there.
That is a question you'd have to ask him.
Frazee now releasing a statement through his attorney, saying he was only notified of the press event an hour before it started. Had he been given more advance notice, he would have participated, it reads. Mr. Frazee hopes and prays for Ms. Barrett's return.
And that was Natalie Burnell reporting. After surging more than 450 points on this day, the Dow cooled to close up at just up about 150. All other U.S. indexes closed up as well.
Investors appear hopeful about U.S.-China trade talks. The president suggesting today in an interview with Reuters that he may be able to use the arrest of a high-ranking Chinese business leader in Canada as a bargaining chip with China. China's top trade negotiator has told U.S. officials, according to the Wall Street Journal, that China will cut tariffs on U.S. auto imports from 40% to 15%. Leaders from North and South Korea are marking another milestone on this day in their recent agreement aimed at reducing military tensions along the Korean peninsula. The leaders shook hands as teams from each side crisscrossed the border. Both sides verified the destruction of 11 guard posts along the demilitarized zone. There are still 200 guard posts remaining along the DMZ, which is the world's most heavily fortified border. All of this as recent satellite images obtained by CNN appear to reveal that North Korea continues to expand a long-range missile base. So for more on this divide between the United States and North Korea and South Korea and North Korea, let's bring in Balbina Huang from Washington. She's a visiting professor at Georgetown University. And Balbina, I mean, what should the United States make of this when they're the South Koreans and the North Koreans happily chatting along the border, and South Korean's president saying we're on the road to reconciliation, when the United States has intelligence indicating that North Korea continues to expand its missile capabilities?
Well, this cooperation between the North and the South is certainly coordinated with the United States. The United States and South Korea have created a working group that are closely coordinating all of the openness between the North and South Koreans. And remember that the United States has the same goal as South Korea, which is peace on the Korean Peninsula. This has been the case since the Korean War. Remember, these are two allies, treaty allies, for the last 65 years. And speaking of allies, in order to put real pressure on North Korea, the United States needs, on one hand, China on its side, which we don't really have because of trade issues, and South Korea. Now, given all these positive steps of rapprochement between the North and the South, how can we know that South Korea will be there on the same page with the United States once it's time to talk sanctions against the North again? I actually disagree. I do not think that we need China. I've always disagreed. Look, remember that China fought with North Korea against the United States and South Korea, and by the way, against the UN forces. Remember that the Korean War was actually a UN war. It was not a war with the United States. It was the United States, of course, was the lead nation, but this was a UN police action, and that was the Korean War, and the Korean War actually never ended. And remember that the Chinese was one of the enemy forces that fought with North Korea, and so you know the reality is that the Chinese have always voted with North Korea, you know, and has thwarted, frankly, along with Russia, in the United Nations, and has worked against, really, the international community for decades. And has actually supported North Korea. But so I really don't think that China has really been supportive.
But Balbina,
so
what about?
It is high time.
I got you about China, but what about South Korea? I mean, to Tal's point, I mean, there may come a certain point where the United States needs to either sanction North Korea again or reimpose something in order to get them to give up their missiles and nukes. Won't that be difficult if South Korea is having this very sort of warm and cozy relationship with them?
No, look, the United States and South Korea are treaty allies. The United States still has 27,000 troops on the Korean Peninsula. The United States currently has, in fact, we've just set up and we have this working group, and in fact, this border crossing that just occurred today was done exactly with the close cooperation and support of the United States government. And the United States ambassador, the special envoy, Steve Biegun, was just appointed by the Trump administration purposely for the close coordination, exactly for this kind of this opening with North Korea. So no, this is not done against any kind of work that the United States does not approve of. In fact, exactly the opposite. So no, this is I don't understand why this is something that the United States would not support.
Well, the reason is because the United States sees.
This is actually very good news.
Right, but the reason is because the United States, while they do see this warm relationship with the South along the border, the United States also sees these satellite images showing that at the very same time, there's North Korea expanding their missile capability. But in any case, Professor Balbina Wong, thank you so much for joining us, professor at Georgetown University. And Tal, do you think that, look, we would all love, of course, North Korea to sort of stop escalating their missile program, but there is progress when you see the South and the North at least agreeing to try to take their heavily fortified border and make it less dangerous.
And in the meantime, the negotiation process between the U.S. and North Korea seemed to be just stalled, but maybe it's better than what we had before, a constant threat, the status quo that we have at the moment. And also, President Trump is expected to meet with Kim Jong-un once again in early 2019. I'm wondering what would be a significant achievement to come back home and show the world that we achieved this time.
Yeah, and hopefully at least there's some commitments before that meeting takes place. But we'll see. There's been a remarkable story developing in West Virginia. Search teams are on their 4th day there searching through an old coal mine.
They're desperate to find 3 people missing inside an abandoned coal mine. Correspondent Tara Palmieri reports.
The clock is ticking for rescue workers to find 3 people trapped since Saturday inside a West Virginia mine. The dangerous search started Sunday. A 4th person, Eddie Williams, walked out on his own on Monday. Williams told officials that the other 3 are alive and well. But the next rescue mission was unsuccessful. Rescue crews using fans to improve air circulation, removing standing water to expand the search area. Eddie's cousin, Kayla Williams, is still trapped inside the mine. As their families wait for updates, Kayla's father, Randy Williams, is speaking out against the pace of the rescue mission.
This don't seem like it's being fast enough. I think they need to be moving a little faster. That's what I think.
Kayla's sister said the friends likely went into the abandoned mine to hunt for scraps of copper.
It's worth money. We got to figure out something how to close these mines where these kids can't get in there. If they ain't got a job, they want money, and the drug epidemic, that's a big part of it too.
And that was Tara Palmieri reporting. We have an update on a pair of nuns in California with some bad habits. Catch that pun? The Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles is now saying that they plan to press charges against the nuns for embezzlement.
The sisters are accused of stealing $500,000 from their private school to pay for gambling trips to Las Vegas. Correspondent Lindsay Davis has the story.
Gambling and jet setting. Not quite the lifestyle you might expect for these two nuns.
They'd come driving in their nice white Volvos, and they lived in a nice condo, and you know, the parents aren't asking, you know, that seems kind of strange for people that took an oath of poverty.
But parents at this California Catholic high school are outraged that their own tuition checks may have been footing that lavish lifestyle. According to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, Sister Mary Margaret Kruper, the principal at St. James Catholic School for 29 years, and Sister Lana Chang, a teacher for 20 years, stole $500,000 since 2006. Parents say they were even given tuition discounts as incentive to pay in cash.
There's a lot of betrayal and feelings of anger, and really you're thinking about how's this going to impact my child? I mean, these were the leaders of the school.
They were accused after a routine audit found they were allegedly funneling money to a long-forgotten church bank account that only they could access.
We do understand that this can be a large-scale investigation. We are dealing with the allegation of misappropriation of funds.
The nuns' order has moved the two sisters into a religious house, removing them from all public religious work, issuing this statement saying, as a religious community, we will not defend the actions of our sisters. What happened is wrong. Our sisters take full responsibility for the choices they made and are subject to the law.
And that was Lindsay Davis reporting.
That's such a, I mean, it's a terrible story. They stole money, but allow me to laugh.
I mean,
it's like that movie, the nuns with Whoopi Goldberg. When they go to Vegas and they... Sister Act.
Sister Act, that's right. Well, I mean, it does go to show that, I mean, gambling habits can be so pernicious that even if you've taken a vow of poverty and promised not to live this sort of lifestyle, you get hooked. And then...
But they did well, apparently.
Yeah. By the way, this holiday season, it is also the season for porch pirates.
Beware. The increase in the number of stolen deliveries is not abnormal, but this thief is literally dancing away with the goods.
Police in the Georgetown section of Washington, D.C. are hoping that this surveillance video will help lead to an arrest.
Yeah, but you don't really see his face. You can only see his movements. So, I mean, how could it lead to an arrest? Only if he wears the same jacket. I can see his face.
Wow. You know, I used to live in Georgetown, and
somebody stole your...
Well, no, there was this thing. You would never leave packages on your front porch because it was just sort of known that people would swipe it. You had to be very careful. Anyway, let's go to a happier story. Our next wedding story, it could steal the spotlight from British royal newlyweds Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
The week-long event in India hosted more than 2,000 guests, including American political celebrities like Hillary Clinton.
And your eyes are not playing tricks on you. That is Clinton and John Kerry cutting the rug with the family of Isha Ambani and Anand Piramal. The bride and groom, who were childhood friends, tied the knot on this day.
They're the children of two of the richest men in India. The bride's dad is worth an estimated $47 billion. The groom's dad is worth $4 billion. The wedding price tag is up for dispute. Estimates range from $15 to $100 million. And the wedding even commanded an appearance by the Queen Bee, Beyonce, who also performed and shared these images on Instagram. You know, David, it's a huge dispute, like who should pay for the wedding, the bride, the groom. Like, I only have $4 billion, you have $47 billion. Like, you should pay for it. to
that looks like that was like the wedding of the century, right? I mean, you've got so many dignitaries from around the world. You're able to fly in Beyonce, which is probably, I don't know, a couple $1 million just to get her perform. Imagine the pressure on the bride and groom now with all the thank you notes left or right.
Right. What do you give them as present? All right, that does it for this hour of Crossroads.
Stay with us at I24 News for much more. We will be right back.